morning and good afternoon. We are now at key number 3, education. And the two of you wrote an article on make mediation a core subject and align it to real world needs. So that are actually two messages in one article. But before we go into the substance of your contribution, I would like to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. Debbie, would you like to start?
Sure, thank you very much, Mignon. My name is Deborah Masucci. I've been in the mediation field for more than 30 years. My professional background started in the securities industry, where I introduced mediation as part of the dispute resolution process. My major contribution, the way I look at it, the major contribution I have was working for a major corporation for 10 years, where I established a dispute resolution initiative. That was at AIG. The goal and the purpose of that, that role was to really embed mediation into the claims process, primarily because the insurance industry, as well as the financial industry as a whole, is a major user of mediation. I currently am a full-time mediator and arbitrator, and I'm going to pat myself on the back. This year I was the 2020 recipient of the James Henry Award for contributions to the dispute resolution that was conferred by CPR.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop the video recording, unfortunately, because it was a very nice introduction, but we had some technical interference. And especially at the moment where you said that you received the prize, you know, you froze, and so.
Is that my internet, or is
yes,
it?
It is your internet. So Debbie, may I ask you to introduce yourself?
With pleasure, Mignon. My name is Deborah Masucci, and I've been in the field of ADR for over 30 years. I started my career in the securities industry, where I embedded mediation into the arbitration or dispute resolution process. I then, and my major accomplishment, I would say, is that I worked for AIG for 10 years where I established their in-house dispute resolution program. The goal and purpose of that program was to embed mediation strategically and effectively in the claims resolution process. So it was an exciting time for me, and it really put AIG ahead of the curve, because in reality, financial companies such as AIG are the largest users of mediation services. And to cap this off, I'm going to be a little proud and let you know that I was this year's 2020 recipient of CPR's James Henry Award for Distinguished Service in the field of ADR. So it was one way to cap my accomplishments, and I currently am a full-time mediator and arbitrator.
That's fantastic. So we have the user perspective on your publication. Barney, may I ask you to introduce yourself too?
Well, first of all, congratulations, Debbie. What an achievement. Manon, thank you. Barney Jordaan. I started my life as a lawyer, teaching, practicing law, and then became a bit of a pracademic, moving into the business school world and acting as mediator, but also as negotiation coach, negotiation front person for a couple of organizations. Originally from South Africa, but now live and teach and practice in Belgium.
Okay.
I've been in the field of mediation for 30 odd years myself as well.
Okay, so we have the user and the academic perspective on this, and both of you are also practicing mediators, so that is fantastic. Let's move to your article. What is the core, the key message that you want people to get after reading your contribution?
Thank you. I think Debbie will touch on the importance of teaching people the kinds of skills one learns as a mediator from almost babyhood onwards. But I think the core of the article for me is the fact that negotiation is sometimes taught as a core subject in law schools. I think in the US it is well established, but in other parts of the world it's often an elective, or you only do negotiation as part of your, say, master's program, or you have to do additional courses to get some exposure to negotiation. There are some universities and business schools that add a little dab of mediation as well, which is great. But I think for us, to be a good mediator, you first have to know something about negotiation, because negotiation is the parent of mediation. The two are so linked. Mediation actually is negotiating by other means through the intervention of a third party. So one needs a solid foundation in negotiation, I think, to become a good mediator. Therefore, at law school, for example, we'd say first let people learn about negotiation and then introduce them to mediation. At business school, of course, it's very difficult to offer long courses in mediation. There just isn't time. On the MBA programs, executive programs, there isn't time to offer, say, a 5 or 10-day mediation course. But what one can offer is what we refer to as mediation literacy, so that the students in the business school participants who come through our hands are at least knowledgeable about mediation. They know where it fits in, they have an awareness of it, and therefore hopefully can stimulate interest in the process itself within their organizations, and perhaps also personal interest in developing themselves as mediators in a more formal way.
Great, thank you. So you're saying that in fact negotiation is the parent of mediation, so it all starts with negotiation.
Yeah.
And that would be the step one in teaching, in fact, everybody, and then giving, in any case, everybody the basic information on mediation and take it from there.
If I can just add one thing, of course, knowing about mediation does not mean one can actually mediate. It needs practice, it needs experience. And with that experience, one develops your own approach. You develop some level of flexibility. You know, when you're trained as a mediator, it's usually a question of learning a certain formula. Some people get stuck on the formula, but I think as you gain experience, and hopefully Debbie will agree with me, is that eventually you learn to fit the process to the problem and shape the process to deal with the issues that the parties have given you to help them resolve.
Great. Debbie, for you, what's the core, the essence of the contribution that you wrote together with Barney?
Well, I agree with everything that Barney has said. In reading all of the articles that are part of this compilation, education is a theme throughout the whole body of work. Establishing core courses in mediation establishes the leaders of the future with the skills to be more productive and effective. A part of recognizing mediation as a true profession is the establishment of mediation as part of a standalone curriculum. Learning how to use mediation strategically and effectively has to be learned early and reinforced constantly. There should be a bottom-up strategy starting with peer mediation for youth, really in the elementary school years through college, and then negotiation and mediation programs should start in college and then go on through the professional schools. The professional schools, including business and law schools. You know, mediation is only effective if the business leader is included. And that starts when business leaders learn the skills to be leaders and form the relationships that will promote them in their careers. Mediation is not a skill learned and practiced just by lawyers. Mediation skills need to be reinforced after school through continuing legal education programs or through professional development within the business. In our article, I did note that negotiation skills in professional development programs that are offered by companies currently are limited to sales training. And while mediators are salespeople, as well as mediation advocates, they sell the deal, but there's a lot more to negotiation within mediation, as we know. Each business should want their employees from every level, to learn mediation skills so that they can prevent a dispute from arising at the earliest stage possible. So here, this is where the learning and the practice go hand in glove and will reinforce the process and really propel the process into that of a profession.
Okay, so you are saying that mediation is not just a legal skill, but in fact all professionals should have these kind of skills. And in fact, we should start as early as possible, if possible in kindergarten or maybe even at home, and then take it into professionalization. And besides learning the proper understanding of mediation, so the knowledge, you also need to have some actual experience, and that can come later in the academic.
So Mignon, it really is developmental too, because the line mediators, the line employees, they're the first level. They're the ones that can prevent a dispute from escalating. So they need to understand and learn those mediation skills. And those are the ones that need to be embedded in every one of us from early stages. Then the leaders themselves in the company reinforce the importance of that, of those mediation skills. Oftentimes, and Barney and I have talked about it, in the United States, mediation seems to be a core process or a core subject in the law school. But I've seen lawyers leave the law school environment, go to work in a law firm or a corporation, and forget the skills, because management is not reinforcing the need to use those skills. And that's where there's the disconnect. If those management leaders understood and bought into the process, and they will reinforce the learning that is done early on.
If I can add to that, Debbie, if I may, your emphasis is on the skills. There's the mediation process, which one is then trained to manage, to implement, and you become more acquainted and familiar with it. But it's these underlying skills, I think Debbie refers to, that are so important. And they don't necessarily need to be attached to negotiation or mediation, but they form the core of it. Things like listening, listening with 3 ears, listening to what is being said. Let's listen to what's not being said, listen to what's behind being said. So it's listening skills. It's the ability to source information by asking relevant questions. It is empathy, putting yourselves in the shoes of the others you are dealing with. It is self-awareness, a little bit of emotional intelligence. It is assertiveness, which is also core. But it's also the ability, I think, to become more comfortable with conflict and perhaps see the positive, the potential positive in a conflict situation, and help others see that. So if those skills can be embedded from childhood onwards, of course, it makes it so much easier for people to learn the more formalized processes of negotiation and mediation later on, and to apply them.
So, and recognition of those courses, what I did not mention was that I most recently was co-chair of the board of directors of the International Mediation Institute. And IMI now has certified training programs. And the goal there is to have these baseline skills that are taught. It's really baseline. We expect other courses to be, above the baseline, but it's just baseline. But they focus on those skills that need to be practiced and evaluated. So there are assessment criteria that are incorporated into it. So, by having not only recognition of a core curriculum, you also having certified programs that are recognized globally at the highest standards, I think helps to push this initiative and give people the tools that they need.
Great. And is that what you call, because you have some excellent wording in your article, mediation literacy and reciprocal skills. Is that what you mean with that, or?
Absolutely, right? Barney, go ahead.
No, indeed. I think that reciprocal skills is that, you can learn the basics, but you have to develop those skills and you have to apply them and practice them. Whether then it's in a more informal way, like peer mediation or workplace-related mediation, where a boss tries to intervene between two people involved in a dispute, or whether you apply them as a formal mediator. But the knowledge, the training, the experience will eventually have to become one. And then, of course, negotiate or mediation literacy is creating an awareness, knowing what it is about, and learning at least some of these skills without necessarily becoming a formal mediator. But that is the sort of thing I think that business schools are well placed to teach to their participants. At master's degree level, MBA level, executive level, is becoming more and more important in today's world, this kind of so-called VUCA environment we live in, for people to have those skills. Because if organizations want to function effectively, people have to learn to live and work together. To improve their decision making, they need conflict resolution skills. They need mediation type skills to help them move the organization forward.
You know, think about it, and there's been a lot in the news, and I'm sure you get it in Europe, about the disruption in American cities.
Yeah.
Just imagine if they really used mediation skills instead of acting out, using their voices instead of their, you know, other things. I think that we would benefit as a country and as a global humanity.
Imagine, Debbie, if every politician, every representative has to undergo mediation training before they can be elected to any office. What a different world this could be. And I would imagine the same for police services everywhere. I mean, I'm sure some are trained in those skills, but the world could be a very different place.
So it's very interesting that you raised that, because I was at an ABA conference where Tim Kaine, who's a U.S. Senator and the former vice presidential candidate with Hillary Clinton, he spoke. And what was very interesting is that when he was governor of the state of Virginia, he hired one person to be the congressional mediator, or the house, whatever you call their house mediator. And the goal of that person was, every time legislation was, you know, proposed, he was given the charging orders: find a way to make this happen. And it worked, you know, and Tim Kaine talked about how it worked. And then somebody challenged him and said, well, why don't you have a similar role in the US Congress? And his answer was, well, each of us senators, we think of ourselves as mediators. But in today's environment, they're not. They're really partisan advocates. They're not mediators. So imagine if that was a role that was established for the US Congress. Imagine if that was a role to settle the Israeli-Palestine dispute.
Or the Brexit talks, for that matter, as well.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So we need to move to a mediation literate society, all of us, all around the world.
That's well put.
So that's a beautiful future image, actually, to move there. To round our conversation off, was there anything when you read the other articles or all the keys together from the entire work that in particular resonated with you, or a key takeaway for you?
Well, if I may, for me, it's just the realization again that mediation is still uncertain about its own position. Is it a skill? Is it a profession? What is it? It's not a profession as yet. We don't have sort of universal standards for the training and accreditation of mediators. Some places have, but it's not a universal kind of norm. So one can't really talk of a profession. I'm also struck again by the lack of field research in mediation, something that Michael Leith's point out in these articles as well, that we need some decent field research. What actually works? What do mediators actually do that work? And what do they avoid doing? And what do they do that actually create deadlocks and end up in a lack of agreement or settlement. We need that kind of research. Of course, it's very difficult to get access to field research. People want the process to be confidential, but there are ways and means, we think, to achieve that. And I think once we can start looking at mediation research, proper research, we can create a credibility around mediation, a scientific credibility that I think can elevate the status of mediation as something that's not just art, but it's also science.
And for you, Debbie, what?
I'm going to pick up on the imagine theme a little bit more. The forward in this series of articles by Layla Love and Nadja Alexander describes the work as not best practice, but next practice. 20 years ago, the power of the internet is today, and the amount of information readily at our fingertips. Just a year ago, we could not imagine the changes we're undergoing because of the global pandemic. That same pandemic has made online dispute resolution a reality, more accurately, virtual mediation and arbitration. Will it be here to stay when this crisis is over? I'm not sure. I get mixed vibes, especially from lawyers who are much more comfortable with the traditional way of doing things. But we should imagine the possibilities of mediation that are within our grasp. This requires more than thinking out of the box. It requires expanding our thinking to the unthinkable. And that has been what has pushed and moved us forward in life, in technology. And it now will push mediation forward into the next generation, into the future. In doing that, we also have to unlock the creativity and the thinking of our youth. And we have to make sure that we diversify the profession so that it more accurately reflects the different thought processes and different thinking that really occurs throughout the world, understanding the cultural nuances. Because let's face it, mediation today is maybe local, but is very global. We more and more, especially with the Singapore Convention, especially with investor state mediation, we're going to be practicing the skills on a global and cross-border and international basis. So how can we imagine the world much differently because of the movement that we're seeing? Imagine.
Oh, what a beautiful concluding words, Debbie and Barney. Thank you so much for this interview and for sharing your insights. It's been lovely to connect again with you, and hopefully to soon be continued.
Thanks for the opportunity, Manuel.